Do you ever feel like the ground disappears beneath you? Like 1 second, you're standing there thinking everything's fine, and then, bam, you're falling. That's how it felt when I found out my father wasn't who he said he was, and neither was my best friend. My name is Julia Marks. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in Chicago. My family isn't perfect, we never were, but we had this illusion of being a close-knit family. My dad owned a construction company that did well enough to keep us comfortable. Not rich, but not struggling either. We lived in a house on the south side with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper. It wasn't much, but it was home until it wasn't anymore. The day started like any other wedding day: chaos, too many people running around, last-minute fixes to the dress, flowers arriving late. But I didn't care because it was my day. The day I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl playing pretend bride in front of the mirror. Everyone was there. My mom adjusted her pearls nervously. My brother cracked jokes to lighten the mood. Rachel, my maid of honor, held my hand, trying to calm my racing heart. Rachel, saying her name now makes me sick. She was more than my best friend, she felt like family. We grew up together, shared secrets, cried over boys, and laughed so our stomachs hurt. When I asked her to be my maid of honor, she acted like it was the greatest honor anyone could give her. Turns out, she did think it was an honor to get closer to my dad. It happened halfway through the ceremony. I was walking down the aisle, trying not to trip in my heels, when I noticed something strange. My dad wasn't at his spot by the altar. He was supposed to walk me down the aisle, but instead, he was nowhere to be seen. Panic bubbled inside me, but I told myself he must have gone to the bathroom or stepped outside for air. People do that sometimes, right? But when the reception rolled around and he still hadn't shown up, I knew something was wrong. Nobody would tell me where he went. They kept saying things like, "Don't worry, he'll be back," and he probably got caught up with work. Work? On my wedding day? Something didn't add up. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the music had died down, I went looking for answers. His jacket was slung over a chair near the bar, and without even thinking, I reached into the pocket. Maybe his phone was there, or maybe some clue about where he'd gone. Instead, I pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. A hotel receipt. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Who keeps receipts like that? Then I saw the date, today, and the name written on it, Rachel Bennett. My stomach dropped. No, not Rachel, not my dad. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Right. I called him immediately, but he didn't answer. I drove to the hotel listed on the receipt, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. When I got to the room, I knocked once, twice, and 3 times before the door opened. And there they were, my dad in his wrinkled suit and Rachel in nothing but a bathrobe. They froze when they saw me. For a moment, no one said anything. Then my dad tried to explain, stammering nonsense about how it wasn't what it looked like. But Rachel? She just stood there, pale and silent, like a ghost haunting my memories. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember driving home. All I know is that I ended up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes I'd been packing for weeks. I needed to get away from them all, to escape the lies and the betrayal. As I shoved clothes into bags, I tripped over a loose floorboard. Irritated, I bent down to fix it, and that's when I found the tin box. It was small and rusted, locked tight with a tiny padlock. I broke it open with a pair of pliers, and inside were stacks of letters. Handwritten letters in my father's messy scrawl. Most of them were addressed to my mother, but one line caught my eye. "I'm sorry for crossing the line with her." Her, who was her? Was it Rachel, or someone else entirely? The questions swirled in my head, each one sharper than the last. Who was my father? What else had he hidden from us? That night, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let them destroy me. Whatever secrets my family was hiding, I would find them. And once I did, I would make sure they paid for every lie, every betrayal, and every broken promise. The tin box was the key, not just to my father's secrets, but to everything they thought they could hide from me. I spent hours in that room, reading each letter like it was a map guiding me through a maze of lies. His handwriting was unmistakable, messy and hurried, filled with regret. But at first, the words didn't make sense. He wrote about mistakes he couldn't undo, promises he'd broken, and debts he owed. And then there was that phrase again, crossing the line with her. I started piecing things together slowly, obsessively. Who was her? Rachel seemed like the obvious answer after what I'd seen at the hotel, but something about it didn't sit right. My dad and Rachel? Sure, maybe once, but these letters went back years, long before she and I became friends. There had to be someone else, someone older, someone deeper in the roots of our family tree. That's when I remembered the attic. It was always off-limits growing up, filled with dusty furniture and boxes no one ever touched. But now, it felt like the only place left to look. With a flashlight in hand and determination, I climbed the narrow stairs. I pushed aside cobwebs and memories I wasn't ready to see. In the corner, buried under piles of old photo albums and Christmas decorations, I found a wooden chest. It smelled faintly of cedar and mildew, its hinges stiff from disuse. Inside were more letters, newspaper clippings, old photographs, and a small leather journal. The journal belonged to my mother. Her handwriting was neat, precise, almost clinical compared to my father's frantic scribbles. As I flipped through the pages, I realized she knew. She knew about him and whoever her was. She often wrote about it. She wrote about the nights she cried herself to sleep. She wrote about the arguments they never resolved. Also, she wrote about the emptiness that felt like a third person in their marriage. One entry stood out. He says it's over, but I don't believe him. How can I trust him when she still calls? When he disappears for hours without explanation? Whoever she wasn't just some fling. This was years of betrayal, tangled so deeply into the fabric of my family that even my mother couldn't cut herself free. But the biggest clue came in the form of a photograph tucked inside the journal. It was a picture of my father standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. She looked younger than him, maybe in her mid-20s, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. On the back of the photo, written in pencil, were 2 words: Leila Harper. The name sent a chill down my spine. I recognized it immediately. It was the name of a business rival who'd tried and failed to take over my father's company years ago. Leila Harper wasn't just competition. She was a ghost story whispered around dinner tables whenever my dad talked shop. According to him, she was ruthless, cunning, and relentless. What he didn't say, and what I now suspected, was that she was also his lover. I needed proof, something concrete to confirm my suspicions. So I did what any desperate person would do. I started digging where no one expected me to look. I checked all the documents in my parents' filing cabinet. This included bank statements and legal contracts. Most of it was dull paperwork. Then I found something odd: transfers to an offshore account. The amounts weren't huge, but they were consistent, dating back nearly a decade. It hit me then: my father wasn't just having an affair. He was funding her, supporting her somehow while pretending to hate her publicly. Maybe that's why her attempts to ruin his business always fell short. They were working together all along. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Anger turned into something darker, colder, a need not just for answers, but for justice. I couldn't let them get away with this, not after what they had done to my family, to me. And then, unexpectedly, help came from someone I least expected. It happened during one of my late-night research binges. I was sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, coffee gone cold beside me, when there was a knock at the door. At first, I ignored it. If it was my dad or Rachel, I wasn't interested. But the knocking persisted, louder this time, until finally I opened the door. Standing there was Emily Carter, my cousin, or at least, that's what everyone called her. Truthfully, we weren't close. Emily was the black sheep of the family, the one nobody talked about unless necessary. She lived on the outskirts of town, far enough away to avoid family gatherings but close enough to stay relevant. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised and slightly annoyed. She held up a manila envelope. "You're not the only one asking questions," she said simply. Inside the envelope, I found documents about Leila Harper's finances. They listed several questionable transactions linked directly to my father's company. They also had emails and screenshots. These showed her discussions about contracts, bids, and payouts. "How did you get this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with disbelief. Emily shrugged. "Let's just say I have my ways. Look, Julia, I know we're not exactly close, but I've known about Dad's indiscretions for years. Mom told me before she died. I figured if anyone deserved to know the truth, it was you." For the first time since finding the tin box, I felt less alone. Emily wasn't just offering information, she was giving me an ally. Together, we began planning. We met secretly, usually late at night in empty parking lots or abandoned warehouses. We went through documents, checking dates and names. We built a case against my father and Leela. Along the way, Emily revealed something else shocking. She wasn't technically part of the Marks family. Her mom, my aunt, had been adopted, making Emily more of a distant relation than a blood cousin. Yet, despite this, she harbored the same resentment toward my father as I did. "He ruined my mom's life," she confessed one night as we worked. "Kept her dependent on him financially, emotionally, treated her like garbage. If anyone deserves revenge, it's us." As the weeks passed, I transformed. The innocent bride who once dreamed of happy endings changed completely. She became sharper, colder, and more calculating. I stopped caring about fairness or forgiveness. All that mattered was exposing the truth and making sure they paid for what they'd done. Our plans centered around my inheritance. My father had promised me shares in his company when I turned 30, a gesture meant to secure my future. Little did he know, those shares would become his downfall. With Emily's help, I negotiated a deal with Leela Harper herself, selling the shares to her rival company in exchange for evidence of my father's crimes. By the time everything was set in motion, I barely recognized myself. Gone was the girl who cried on her wedding day. In her place stood a woman ready to burn the world down if it meant justice. The day it all came together, I woke up feeling like a storm cloud ready to break. The pieces were in place. The documents, the shares, the alliance with Leela Harper's rival company. All that was left was execution and watching my father realize he had underestimated me. I dressed carefully that morning. I chose a sharp black blazer over tailored pants. My heels clicked ominously on the floor. Wasn't just revenge, it was a performance, one I intended to play perfectly. My father had always dismissed me as soft, fragile, and too emotional to handle the real world. Today, I would show him how wrong he was. The first step was simple, a meeting at his office. He called me there himself, claiming he wanted to clear the air about what happened at my wedding. Part of me wondered if he thought groveling could fix things, if he imagined I'd forgive him after everything. But I didn't care why he asked me to come. All that mattered was getting him into the boardroom where Emily and I had set the stage. When I arrived, he was already waiting, sitting at the head of the long mahogany table like some kind of king surveying his kingdom. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Julia," he said, standing as I entered. His voice wavered slightly unsure. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a seat across from him, placing the folder containing our evidence on the table between us. His eyes flicked toward it but didn't linger. "I assume you know why I'm here," I said finally, my tone flat and deliberate. He hesitated, then nodded. "Your mother told me you found the letters. I can explain." "No," I interrupted sharply. "You don't get to explain anything, not anymore." I opened the folder and slid out the first document, a copy of the offshore account transfers. His face went pale almost instantly. "What is this?" he demanded. I could hear the tremor in his voice. "This," I replied coolly, "is proof that you've been funneling money to Leela Harper for years, supporting her while pretending to hate her publicly, using her to manipulate your business deals." His jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked like he might deny it. But then his shoulders sagged, defeated. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Like what?" I shot back, leaning forward. "Like betraying Mom, like sleeping with Rachel, like lying to everyone who trusted you." He flinched at each accusation, guilt etched into every line of his face. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him, but only for a second. "That's not all," I continued, pulling out another document. "These are the shares you promised me when I turned 30. You probably thought they'd keep me quiet, give me something to hold on to. But instead, I sold them to Leela's biggest competitor." His eyes widened in shock, hands trembling as he reached for the paper. You did what?" "They're filing a hostile takeover next week," I explained, savoring the look of horror spreading across his features. "And thanks to the evidence Emily and I collected, they'll have no trouble proving your involvement in illegal activities. By the end of the month, you won't just lose your company, you'll lose everything." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what I'd done in the air, suffocating. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why are you doing this?" It was the question I'd been dreading, not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. Because you destroyed us, I said simply. Mom, me, even Rachel. You treated us like pawns in your game, like we didn't matter. Well, now it's your turn to feel what it's like to lose everything. He stared at me, searching for some trace of the daughter he used to know, but she was gone. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, news of the scandal broke, splashed across headlines and social media feeds. My father's reputation crumbled overnight. Clients abandoned him, partners distanced themselves, and soon enough, his company declared bankruptcy. Rachel disappeared shortly after, leaving behind an empty apartment and rumors of her fleeing the town. I never saw her again. As for Leila Harper, she tried to distance herself from the mess, issuing statements denying any connection to my father. But the damage was done. Her name became synonymous with corruption, and her career spiraled downward. Watching it all unfold gave me a strange sense of satisfaction, but also emptiness. Revenge doesn't fill the void left by betrayal. It just reshapes it. One night, weeks after everything ended, I returned to my childhood home. The house was quiet now, abandoned except for memories clinging to its walls. Upstairs in the attic, I found the photograph of my father and Leila again. This time, I didn't look at their faces. Instead, I focused on the background, a faded sign behind them reading Harper Construction Co. I held the picture for a moment longer before tossing it into the fireplace. As the flames consumed it, I whispered, "She was his shame. I made her our legacy." And with that, I walked away, leaving the ashes behind. Revenge is a funny thing. People think it's about closure, about making things right. But the truth is, it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring back the years my mother spent crying over him, or erase the betrayal I felt when I found Rachel in that hotel room. What it does do is change you. I used to believe in happy endings. Now I know better. Life isn't fair, and justice doesn't heal wounds, it just leaves scars. But maybe that's okay. Maybe scars are supposed to remind us of how far we've come, even if the journey cost us pieces of ourselves along the way. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I went too far. If there was another way to make them pay without becoming someone I barely recognize. But then I remember the look on my father's face when he realized what I had done. The fear in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. Now, when I pass by the old house or hear whispers of my family's downfall, I don't feel guilt, or not much anyway. What I feel is freedom. For the first time in my life, I'm untethered from their lies, their secrets, their poison. But here's the thing about revenge. It doesn't end with you walking away free. You carry the weight of your actions. No matter how right it seems, part of you belongs to those you harmed. As I sit here now, writing these words, I can still hear my mother's voice echoing in my head. She used to say, "A family is only as strong as its weakest link." I used to think she meant we had to protect each other, hold each other up. Now, I realize she was warning me that weakness spreads like a disease, and sometimes the only cure is fire. So I burned them all, my father, Leila, and Rachel. Their legacies turned to ash because of me, and though the smoke has cleared, I can still smell it lingering on my skin. Maybe that's what revenge is, not justice, but a mark you carry forever. A reminder that even when you win, you lose something too. They called her a mistake, I whisper into the silence, but mistakes shape us more than triumphs ever could. And with that, I close this chapter of my life, not healed, not whole, but alive. Alive enough to keep moving forward, one step at a time.